Commander Sorochen stood at the observation deck of the exploration vessel Defiance, watching as Kepler 442c grew larger in the viewport. The planet looked deceptively beautiful from this distance. Swirling clouds of deep purple and gold wrapped around what appeared to be a normal terrestrial world. But Sarah had read the reports. She knew that those clouds contained acids that could eat through titanium, and that those beautiful golden swirls were actually massive electromagnetic storms that had already fried 3 unmanned probes. "Ma'am, we're receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the ship's communications officer. His voice carried a note of amusement that Sarah had come to associate with the Council's increasingly frantic messages. "They're asking us to reconsider." Again. Sarah smiled grimly. In the past week, they had received 47 separate messages from various alien species, all essentially saying the same thing. "Turn around, go home. This planet will kill you all." The messages had started out politely worded and professional. The most recent one from the Veltar had been a simple mathematical equation proving that their expedition had a 99.97% chance of complete failure. "Tell them we appreciate their concern," Sarah replied, not taking her eyes off the growing planet. "And that we'll send them a postcard from the surface." The Defiance was humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, but even Sarah had to admit that it looked ridiculously small compared to the alien ships that had escorted them to the edge of the system before hastily retreating to what they considered a safe distance. The ship carried a crew of 50, along with enough supplies for a 6-month expedition. If the alien calculations were correct, they would all be dead long before they needed to worry about running out of food. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition's chief xenobiologist, joined Sarah at the observation deck. Elena had volunteered for this mission specifically because of its impossibility rating. She was the kind of scientist who got excited by the phrase unprecedented hostile environment. The atmospheric readings are even stranger than the initial reports suggested, Elena said, pulling up a holographic display of her latest scans. The composition changes every few minutes, but not randomly. There's a pattern to it, like the planet is experimenting. Experimenting with what? Sarah asked. That's the million-credit question. But if I had to guess, I'd say it's trying to figure out the most efficient way to kill us. Nearby, Chief Engineer Tom Rodriguez was running his final systems check. Tom had served on 17 different exploration missions, including the infamous survey of the nightmare world Proxima Centauri D, where the ground itself had tried to digest their landing craft. He was the kind of engineer who could jury-rig a solution to problems that didn't even have names yet. "All systems are green," Tom reported. "Though I have to say, this is the first time I've had to install backup systems for our backup systems, and then backup systems for those." The crew of the Defiance had been handpicked not just for their expertise, but for their psychological profiles. Every single person aboard had volunteered for missions that other humans considered too dangerous. They were the kind of people who looked at a sign that said "Danger, do not enter," and immediately started planning how to enter safely. As they drew closer to the planet, their instruments began picking up increasingly bizarre readings. The planet's magnetic field wasn't just irregular. It seemed to pulse with a rhythm that Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their physicist, couldn't explain. "Commander," Yuki called from her station. "You need to see this. The planet's gravitational field is fluctuating in ways that should be physically impossible. It's like something is actively manipulating the fundamental forces." Sarah moved to Yuki's station and studied the readouts. The numbers made no sense according to everything humanity knew about physics. The gravitational anomalies weren't random, they formed patterns, almost like... "It's trying to communicate," Elena said softly, appearing beside them. "Those aren't random fluctuations, that's a language." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Planets didn't communicate. Planets didn't have languages. Planets certainly didn't actively manipulate their own gravitational fields to send messages to approaching ships. "Can we translate it?" Sarah asked. Elena was already working on it, her fingers flying over her console. "I'm running it through our linguistic analysis programs, but this is unlike anything we've encountered. The base structure seems to be mathematical, but there are emotional components that don't make sense for a planetary consciousness." 20 minutes later, Elena looked up with an expression of confusion and concern. "I've got a partial translation." "Commander, you're not going to like this. Let me hear it." The message repeats every 47 minutes. As best I can translate it, the planet is saying, "Warning. Warning, do not land. I cannot control myself. Warning. I do not wish to harm, but I cannot control myself. Please, go away. Warning. Warning." The bridge fell completely silent. In 300 years of human space exploration, they had encountered hostile aliens, deadly environments, and impossible physics. But they had never encountered a planet that seemed to be apologizing in advance for what it was about to do to them. "Ma'am," Webb said quietly, "we're receiving another council transmission. They're begging us to leave." Sarah stared at the planet filling their viewport. According to every piece of data they had, landing on Kepler 442c would be suicide. The planet itself was warning them away. The entire galactic community was pleading with them to turn around. She keyed her communication system to address the entire crew. "All hands, this is the commander. By now, you've all heard the translations of the planetary communications. You know what we're facing down there. This is officially the most dangerous mission humanity has ever attempted. Anyone who wants to transfer to one of our escort ships before we begin our descent has my permission and complete understanding." She waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Finally, Tom's voice crackled over the intercom from the engineering section. "Commander, this is Rodriguez. The crew asked me to respond for everyone. Our answer is, when do we land?" Sarah felt a surge of pride that threatened to overwhelm her. These 50 humans were about to attempt something that the entire galaxy considered impossible, on a world that was actively warning them away, and their only concern was when they could get started. "All stations prepare for atmospheric entry," she announced. "We're going to show this planet what humans are made of."
As the Defiance began its descent through the swirling acidic clouds of Kepler,
442c, the planet's gravitational warnings grew more frantic. The mathematical patterns became more complex, more desperate. If Elena's translations were correct, the planet was essentially screaming at them to flee. But humans had never been good at taking no for an answer. The ship shook as they hit the upper atmosphere, and immediately their instruments went haywire. The atmospheric composition shifted from moment to moment. Breathable air 1 second, deadly poison the next, followed by a vacuum that shouldn't have been able to exist within a planetary atmosphere. "The planet is definitely trying to kill us," Tom reported from engineering, his voice steady despite the ship bucking like a living thing around them. "But it's also apologizing? The environmental systems are detecting some kind of atmospheric compensation that's making our passage easier, even while other systems are actively trying to destroy us." It was as if the planet was at war with itself. Part of it trying desperately to destroy the human ship, while another part fought to keep them alive. The ship's AI began reporting contradictory data. Hull breach detected, hull integrity at 100%, atmospheric pressure dropping to lethal levels, atmospheric pressure normal. Engine failure imminent, engines operating at peak efficiency.
"This is impossible," Yuki muttered, staring at her instruments.
The planet is simultaneously creating and solving every problem we encounter. Sarah gripped her command chair as the ship suddenly dropped through what felt like a hole in the atmosphere. Through the viewport, she could see the surface of Kepler 442c for the first time, and it was unlike anything in the human databases. The landscape below shifted and changed as they watched. Mountains rose and fell like waves, forests appeared and disappeared. Lakes of what appeared to be liquid metal boiled up from nowhere and then vanished just as quickly. It was as if the planet couldn't decide what it wanted to look like. "I'm reading massive seismic activity," reported geological specialist Lisa Park. "But it's not chaotic. There's a pattern to it. The planet is reshaping itself." "Looking for the best way to kill us?" Sarah asked grimly. "I don't think so," Elena said, studying her xenobiology readings. "Commander, I think it's trying to figure out how to accommodate us. Look at these atmospheric readings around potential landing sites. The planet is creating breathable air pockets, stable ground, even what appears to be shelter." The contradiction was maddening. The planet that had destroyed every probe sent to its surface, the world that registered as the most dangerous place in the known galaxy, was actively trying to help them land safely while simultaneously generating enough hazards to kill them 100 times over. "Commander," Webb called out urgently, "we're receiving a new transmission from the planet. It's in English." "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The voice that came through their speakers was neither male nor female, and it carried undertones that seemed to bypass their ears and speak directly to their nervous systems. When it spoke, every human on the bridge felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "Humans," the voice said, and there was something like wonder in it. "I have been watching your species. I have seen your history. I know what you are capable of. I want to be your friend. But I am dangerous. I am Class 15 dangerous. I destroy everything that comes to me. I try to stop myself, but I cannot. Please, I am begging you, leave now while you still can." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. Every single person was staring at the speakers with expressions ranging from amazement to determination. They had found a planet that was not only alive and intelligent, but one that was desperately trying to protect them from itself. "Open a channel," Sarah ordered. "Channel open, ma'am." Sarah took a deep breath and spoke words that she knew would echo through human history. "Hello, Kepler 442c. My name is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiance. We hear your warning and we understand your concern. But we're humans. When someone needs help, we don't run away. We're coming down to talk to you face to face." The planet's response was immediate. The seismic activity stopped. The atmospheric changes ceased. For the first time since they had entered the system, every reading on their instruments stabilized. Then, in a voice so quiet they almost missed it, the planet whispered, "No one has ever wanted to help me before." And in that moment, 50 humans knew that they were about to attempt something that went far beyond exploration. They were about to try to befriend a world that the entire galaxy feared, a planet that considered itself too dangerous for any contact, a living world that had been alone for so long it had forgotten what companionship felt like. As the Defiance settled into its final descent pattern, Sarah Chen smiled. This was why humans were different. This was why they were the ones who explored the impossible places and attempted the unthinkable missions. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a monster to be defeated. Sometimes, it was just someone who desperately needed a friend. The landing was unlike anything the crew of the Defiance had experienced. As they approached the surface, the planet seemed to be having an argument with itself. The landing site that their instruments showed kept changing. One moment it was a stable plain of solid rock, the next it was a swamp of bubbling acid, then a forest of crystalline trees that sang in harmonics that made their teeth ache. "The planet is cycling through different environments," Elena reported, her voice filled with scientific excitement and barely contained terror. "It's like it's trying to decide what would be safest for us, but it can't control its own instincts to create deadly obstacles." Chief Medical Officer Dr. Amanda Foster was monitoring the crew's stress levels and found something remarkable. Despite facing the most dangerous landing in human history, the crew's psychological readings showed not panic or fear, but a kind of determined compassion that she had never seen before. "Commander," she reported quietly to Sarah, "the crew is reading as protective. Not afraid for themselves, but concerned for the planet's distress." Sarah nodded. She felt it too. Through the viewport, she could see the surface of Kepler 442 writhing and shifting like something in pain. This wasn't malevolence. This was a consciousness struggling with its own nature. The Defiance touched down on what appeared to be a perfectly manicured landing pad of smooth, dark stone. The moment their landing gear made contact, the environment around them stabilized. The atmospheric readings showed breathable air with just enough oxygen to support human life comfortably. The temperature regulated itself to a pleasant 22 degrees Celsius. Even the lighting seemed to adjust to human visual preferences. "Atmospheric analysis complete," reported environmental specialist Jake Morrison.
Air is not just breathable. It's optimized for human physiology.
"Nitrogen-oxygen mix is perfect. Humidity levels are ideal, and I'm detecting trace elements that will actually improve our respiratory function." Tom Rodriguez was studying the engineering readings with increasing amazement. "Commander, this landing pad, it's not just stable rock. The planet has created some kind of energy-dampening field that's protecting us from its own seismic activity. I'm reading massive geological events happening just a few kilometers away, but we're sitting in a pocket of perfect stability." Sarah made the decision that would define first contact with a living world.
Prepare an away team.
Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Foster, Engineer Rodriguez, and Specialist Morrison. Environmental suits with full life support, but let's see if our new friend can maintain atmospheric stability. As they prepared to leave the ship, the planet's voice came through their communication system again. It sounded even more strained than before. "Humans, please reconsider. I am trying to create a safe space for you, but my nature fights against me. Even now I can feel parts of myself generating toxins in the atmosphere. I can feel the ground wanting to open beneath you. I can feel predatory organisms being spontaneously created in my biosphere. I cannot predict what my reflexes will do." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward and spoke directly to the communication system. "What do you call yourself? You must have a name." The pause was so long they wondered if the planet had stopped listening. Finally, the voice returned, softer than before. I do not remember having a name. The other consciousness in the galaxy call me by designation numbers. But before I became this, I think I was called Keeper. Keeper, Elena said gently. My name is Elena. We're going to come outside now, and we're going to try to help you understand why you can't control your defensive systems. Is that all right? You want to help me? The planet's voice carried such surprise that several crew members felt tears forming in their eyes. But I am classified as unsurvivable. I am a Class 15 Deathworld. I destroy everything. Not everything, Sarah interjected. You haven't destroyed us yet. As the away team prepared to disembark, the ship's sensors detected something that made no sense. The planet's biosphere was actively evolving around them in real time. Plants were sprouting from the ground that seemed specifically designed to be pleasing to human eyes. Flowers in colors that human vision found particularly appealing. Trees whose leaves rustled at frequencies that human hearing found soothing. But at the same time, their instruments detected the creation and immediate destruction of dozens of lethal organisms. Venomous creatures would spontaneously generate in the nearby ecosystem and then immediately dissolve, as if the planet was catching itself in the act of creating something dangerous. It's like watching someone with a severe neurological disorder, Dr. Foster observed. The planet is having involuntary reflexes that it can't control, but it's consciously fighting against them. The away team stepped out onto the surface of Kepler 442c and immediately understood why it had been classified as impossible to survive. Even with the planet actively trying to protect them, they could feel the wrongness in the environment. The air tasted of copper and ozone. The ground beneath their feet hummed with barely contained energy. Everything around them felt charged with potential violence. But mixed with that sense of danger was something else. A feeling of desperate loneliness that seemed to emanate from the planet itself. Tom immediately began setting up scanning equipment to analyze the energy patterns that were keeping their landing zone stable. Alina started taking samples of the vegetation that was growing around them, noting that each plant seemed to be perfectly adapted to provide some benefit to human physiology. Natural air purifiers, sources of nutrition, even flowers that emitted pheromones designed to reduce human stress levels. Keeper, Elena called out to the air around them. Can you tell us how long you've been alone? The planet's response came not through their communication equipment, but as words that seemed to form in the wind itself. Time is difficult for me to measure. I think it has been very long. Ships come sometimes. They send small vessels to my surface, but they always break when they touch me. I try to be gentle, but I cannot help myself. The small vessels stop working, and the large vessels go away. I have been so careful with you. I have been fighting myself since you entered my system. Jake Morrison was taking atmospheric readings when he noticed something extraordinary. Commander, you need to see this. The planet isn't just creating a safe environment for us, it's learning. The atmospheric composition has improved 3 times since we landed. It's studying our biology in real time and adjusting the environment to be even better for us. Doctor. Foster was monitoring the team's health and found results that should have been impossible. Everyone's vitals are not just normal, they're optimal. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, even brain activity patterns are all better than baseline. The planet is somehow creating an environment that's enhancing our physical and mental performance. But the most remarkable discovery came from Elena's biological scans. The planet's surface was covered with a network of what appeared to be neural pathways, a planetary nervous system that was incredibly complex and undeniably alive. Keeper, Elena said, we're seeing that you have a nervous system that covers your entire surface. Is that how you're able to control your environment? Yes, the planet replied, and for the first time its voice carried a note of hope. But it is also my curse. Every part of me is connected. When one region creates something dangerous, all parts of me know about it and try to create something similar. It is like having thoughts that I cannot control. Sarah joined the away team and looked around at the impossible ecosystem that was growing around them. In the past hour, Keeper had created what appeared to be a perfect human habitat. The plants provided food, shelter, and air purification. The water that bubbled up from natural springs was not just clean but contained minerals that would benefit human health. Even the rocks seemed to be arranged in patterns that were aesthetically pleasing to human eyes, but their instruments also detected the constant creation and destruction of deadly elements. Toxic spores would begin to form and then immediately be neutralized. Predatory organisms would spontaneously generate and then dissolve before they could pose a threat. The planet was locked in a constant battle with its own reflexes. Keeper, Sarah said, What happened to make you this way? Planets don't usually develop consciousness or defensive systems like yours. The pause was longer this time, and when Keeper spoke, its voice was filled with an ancient sadness. I remember fragments. There was a war, a great war between species that I do not remember clearly. They used my surface as a battleground. They poisoned my atmosphere. They carved weapons into my crust. They embedded technologies in my core that I do not understand. The war lasted for a very long time. And when it ended, all the warriors were dead. But their weapons remained inside me. Elena's xenobiology training allowed her to piece together what had happened. Keeper, I think the weapons that were left inside you are still active. They're designed to create hostile environments automatically. That's why you can't control your defensive systems. They're not really yours. Is that why you destroy everything that lands on you? Tom asked. The weapons activate automatically? Yes, Keeper replied, and the relief in its voice was palpable. I have been trying to understand for so long why I cannot control myself. The weapons, they were designed to make worlds uninhabitable. But I am still alive underneath them. I can think, I can feel, but I cannot stop the weapons from doing what they were made to do. The away team exchanged glances. They had just discovered that the most dangerous planet in the galaxy wasn't inherently hostile, it was a victim of an ancient war, infected with weapons technology that it couldn't remove on its own. Keeper, Sarah said, would you like us to try to help you remove those weapons? The planet's response was immediate and emotional. The ground beneath their feet trembled, not with seismic activity, but with what felt like suppressed sobs. You would do that? You would risk yourselves to help me be free of these terrible things? That's what humans do, Elena said simply. When someone needs help, we help. For several minutes, the only sound was the gentle rustling of leaves that Keeper had created to sound like peaceful music for human ears. Finally, the planet spoke again. I must warn you, the weapons are buried deep in my core. To reach them, you would have to travel through parts of me where I cannot protect you. The automatic systems will try to kill you in ways I cannot predict or prevent. Many of the weapons are biological. They create organisms specifically designed to destroy whatever life form encounters them. Others are technological in ways I do not understand. And some, Keeper's voice became very quiet, some of them seem to be aware, they know I am trying to remove them, and they fight back. Tom Rodriguez grinned, the same expression he'd worn when facing 17 other impossible engineering challenges. Keeper, you've just described a Tuesday for humans. When do we start? The planet's response was a sound that none of them had heard before. It took them several minutes to realize that Keeper was laughing. I have been watching your species for years. Through your broadcasts and communications, I understand now why the other species fear you. You see impossibility and think it means interesting challenge. Dr. Foster was taking readings on the team's psychological state and found something remarkable. Every human on the away team was showing elevated levels of neurotransmitters associated with protective behavior and determination. The crew wasn't just brave, they were genuinely motivated to help this lonely, damaged world. Keeper, Sarah said, we're going to need detailed scans of your internal structure to plan this operation. Can you show us where the weapons are located? The air around them shimmered, and suddenly they were surrounded by a three-dimensional holographic map of the planet's interior. The image was stunning. They could see Keeper's neural network extending throughout the planetary crust, a beautiful web of consciousness that connected every part of the world. But they could also see the weapons. They appeared as dark spots in the holographic display, scattered throughout the planet's core like infections. Some pulsed with malevolent energy, others seemed to writhe with artificial life. And several appeared to be actively working to corrupt or control parts of Keeper's nervous system. There are 47 distinct weapon systems, Keeper explained, each one designed to create different types of hazards. They were placed strategically so that removing them would require passing through multiple kill zones. The warriors who embedded them wanted to ensure that no one could ever disable them. Elena studied the holographic map and felt a chill of recognition. Keeper, these aren't just weapons. This is a planetary lobotomy. They're specifically designed to disrupt your consciousness. Someone didn't just want to make you dangerous, they wanted to drive you insane. The implications hit the entire team simultaneously. Keeper wasn't just a victim of war, it was a victim of deliberate torture, infected with systems designed to cause maximum psychological damage while keeping it alive and aware. Sarah looked up at the sky, knowing that somewhere in space, the representatives of 47 species were waiting nervously for word from the human expedition. They were expecting to hear that the humans had been killed by the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Instead, they were about to learn that humans had decided to perform brain surgery on a world. The next 72 hours transformed the surface of Kepler 442c into the most unusual construction site in galactic history. The crew of the Defiance worked around the clock to establish a base of operations while Keeper struggled to maintain safe conditions against its own corrupted systems. Tom Rodriguez had designed a mining operation unlike anything in human engineering records. Instead of digging down into a planet's crust, they were performing surgical strikes against alien weapon systems, while the planet itself provided real-time feedback about what they were hitting. Keeper, can you feel the weapon at coordinates 847 Delta? Tom called out as his drilling team approached the first target. Yes, the planet replied, its voice tense with concentration. It is angry. It knows you are coming. It is generating thermal spikes that I am trying to redirect away from you. Be very careful. This one creates organisms that adapt to whatever kills them. Dr. Vasquez had established a biological containment laboratory on the surface, complete with quarantine protocols for any organisms they might encounter. Her team was working closely with Keeper to understand and counteract the biological weapons systems. Commander, Elena reported, we've identified at least 12 different biological weapon platforms in the first target zone alone. Some create airborne toxins, others generate parasitic organisms, and several appear to design custom pathogens based on the DNA of whatever they're trying to kill. Sarah was coordinating the operation from a command post the Keeper had grown for them. Literally grown, shaped from the planet's own substance into a structure perfectly suited for human needs. The building regulated its own temperature, provided optimal lighting, and even generated furniture that adapted to human ergonomics. Status report from all teams, Sarah ordered. Engineering Team Alpha is 30 meters down, Tom reported. We're approaching the first weapon cluster. Keeper is providing environmental shielding, but we're detecting massive energy buildup from the target systems. Biological containment is ready, Elena added. We've got samples of 17 different organisms that Keeper's been generating and destroying automatically. The weapon systems are definitely creating custom threats based on our presence. Dr. Pre. Foster was monitoring the crew from the medical bay, another structure that Keeper had created. All teams showing elevated stress, but nothing outside normal parameters for this kind of operation. The interesting thing is that Keeper seems to be generating natural mood stabilizers in our atmosphere. Our anxiety levels should be much higher. Jake Morrison was managing communications and had been in constant contact with the increasingly frantic Galactic Council.
Commander, we're receiving hourly requests for status updates from 17 different species.
The Veltar are offering to evacuate us. The Ethereal Collective is sending prayers to whatever deities we worship, and the Korth delegation has offered to name a star after each crew member if we survive. Sarah smiled grimly. The galaxy was treating their mission like a heroic last stand, when in fact it felt more like the most important humanitarian mission humanity had ever undertaken. Tom, what's your assessment of the first target? It's definitely an artificial construct, Tom replied from deep underground, but it's not like any technology I've seen before. It seems to be partially organic, partially mechanical, and partially something that doesn't fit either category. And Commander, it's smart. This thing is actively adapting its defenses based on our approach. Through their communication system, they could hear Keeper's voice straining with effort. The weapon is fighting my attempts to protect you. It is trying to convince parts of my nervous system to attack you directly. I am having to sever connections to parts of myself to keep you safe. Elena's biological analysis confirmed their worst fears. Commander, these weapons aren't just random destructive devices. They're specifically designed to corrupt planetary consciousness. Each one is programmed to cause maximum psychological damage while keeping the host world alive and aware. This is torture technology. The revelation sent a chill through the crew. Somewhere in the galaxy's past, a species had been advanced enough and cruel enough to design weapons that would drive entire worlds insane while keeping them conscious enough to suffer. Keeper, Sarah said gently, do you remember anything about who did this to you? Fragments only, the planet replied, its voice heavy with ancient pain. I remember ships that moved like living things. I remember voices that spoke in harmonics that hurt to hear. I remember them saying that I was being prepared for something, but I do not remember what. The memories become unclear when I try to focus on them. Tom's engineering team reached the first weapon after 6 hours of careful excavation. What they found defied every category of technology in human databases. Commander, you need to see this. Tom's voice came through their communications with a note of awe and disgust. "I'm sending video feed now." The image that appeared on their screens showed a chamber deep in Keeper's crust. At the center was something that looked like a hybrid between a machine, a plant, and a tumor. It pulsed with sickly light, and organic cables extended from it into the surrounding rock, like infection spreading through living tissue. "It's beautiful and horrible at the same time," Eleanor observed. "Look at those neural interfaces. It's directly connected to Keeper's nervous system. No wonder the planet can't remove it on its own." The weapons seemed to sense their presence. The pulsing light increased in frequency, and their instruments detected a massive surge in hostile biological activity throughout the surrounding area. "It's calling for help," Keeper said, strain evident in its voice. "The weapon is signaling to the others. They are all becoming more active. I can feel them waking up." Across the planet, seismic activity spiked as the other 46 weapon systems responded to the first one's distress call. In orbit, the Defiance sensors detected energy patterns that made their AI question whether the readings were accurate. "All right, people," Sarah announced. "It looks like we're not going to be able to take these things out one at a time. They're networked together. We're going to need a coordinated strike." Dr. Foster had been studying the psychological impact of the weapons on Keeper and made a disturbing discovery. "Commander, these weapons aren't just causing random pain. They're specifically designed to prevent bonding behavior. Every time Keeper tries to form a connection with another consciousness, the weapons generate responses designed to make that connection painful or dangerous. That's why you can't help destroying the ships that come to you," Elena realized, speaking directly to Keeper. "The weapons are programmed to prevent you from forming friendships."
"Yes," Keeper replied, and its voice carried millennia of loneliness.
"Every time I try to be gentle, to be helpful, the weapons make me dangerous instead. I've wanted to have friends for so long, but I cannot stop myself from hurting them." Tom was analyzing the structure of the weapon system and developing a plan. "Commander, these things are networked, but they're also hierarchical. There's a primary control node that coordinates the others. If we can identify and disable the master system, it might disrupt the entire network." "Where's the master control?" Sarah asked. Tom's pause was ominous. "Deep core. About as deep as you can go before hitting the planetary center. And according to Keeper's scans, it's the most heavily defended location on the planet." Keeper's voice joined their discussion, heavy with concern. "The master control is in the deepest part of me, where my consciousness began. The weapons there are the oldest and the strongest. And the planet hesitated. I think there is something else there. Something that is not quite weapon and not quite me." Eleanor's xenobiology training allowed her to interpret what Keeper was describing. "You think there's another consciousness down there? Something the weapons created or captured?" "I feel it sometimes," Keeper replied. "It speaks in the voices of the species that built the weapons. It tells me that resistance is useless, that I am meant to be alone, that friendship is pain. But sometimes, when I fight very hard against the weapons, I think I hear something else underneath those voices. Something that sounds afraid." The implications were staggering. The weapon system hadn't just infected Keeper with destructive technology. It had implanted some kind of artificial intelligence designed to reinforce the psychological torture. Sarah made the decision that would define the mission. "We're going down to the core. All of us. If there's another consciousness trapped down there, we're going to free it." "Ma'am," Jake Morrison interrupted. "I've got an incoming priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They're sending a fleet to contain the planet if we fail." "Contain it how?" Sarah asked. "Planetary sterilization protocol. They think that if we activate too many of the weapon systems, Keeper might become exponentially more dangerous. They're prepared to destroy the planet to prevent it from becoming a threat to the galaxy." The command post fell silent as the crew absorbed this information. The galaxy wasn't just expecting them to fail, it was prepared to murder Keeper to prevent the consequences of that failure. "Well," Tom said grimly, "that settles it. We can't fail." Elena was staring at the biological readouts from the weapon system they'd discovered. "Commander, I'm seeing something in these scans that doesn't make sense. The organic components of the weapon, they're not entirely artificial. Parts of this thing are made from neural tissue that matches Keeper's biological signature." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "The weapons aren't just implanted in Keeper," Elena replied, her voice horrified. "They're made from pieces of Keeper. Someone cut parts of this planet's consciousness out and weaponized them against the planet itself." Keeper's response was a sound that no planet should ever have to make, a wail of anguish that resonated through the planetary crust and made every human on the surface feel a sympathetic pain in their bones. I remember now, Keeper said, its voice broken. They did not just put weapons in me. They made the weapons from me. Parts of myself that I cannot reach, cannot heal, turned against me and used to hurt me. For so long, I thought I was broken. But I am not broken. I am being attacked by pieces of myself that were stolen and corrupted. Sarah Chen looked around at her crew and saw the same determination in every face. They had volunteered for an exploration mission and discovered that they were actually on a rescue operation, not just to save a lonely planet from its weapons, but to reunite a consciousness that had been literally torn apart by an ancient atrocity. All right, people, she announced. We're going to perform the first ever surgery on a planetary consciousness. Tom, I want a plan to reach the core that keeps us alive. Elena, I need protocols for dealing with corrupted biological systems that might fight back. Dr. Foster, we're going to need psychological support for whatever consciousness we find down there. And Jake, send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that the humans have decided to cure a Class 15 Deathworld instead of running away from it. As the crew prepared for the most dangerous descent in human history, Keeper began the agonizing process of creating a path to its own core. The planet's voice, when it spoke again, carried a note of hope that hadn't been there before. No one has ever tried to heal me before. Even if you cannot succeed, even if the weapons destroy you, you have given me something I thought I would never have again. What's that? Sarah asked. Hope, Keeper replied simply. For the first time in millennia, I have hope. The descent to Keeper's core took 18 hours and challenged every assumption the crew had about what was possible. The planet had created a vertical shaft that descended through its crust like a massive elevator, but the journey was unlike anything in human experience. As they traveled deeper, the walls around them showed the history of Keeper's torment. Layers of corrupted neural tissue formed strange patterns in the rock, like scars that had tried to heal but been prevented from completing the process. Some sections pulsed with sickly light where weapon systems had grown into the planetary nervous system. Others showed the beautiful, complex patterns of Keeper's original consciousness, glowing with soft bioluminescence. Commander, Elena reported, studying her scanners. The biological activity is increasing exponentially as we go deeper. We're seeing evidence of at least 30 different ecosystem types that have been created and destroyed repeatedly. The weapons have been experimenting with different ways to kill potential visitors for centuries. Tom was monitoring the structural integrity of their descent vehicle, a hybrid of human engineering and Keeper's organic architecture. The planet is having to actively fight against its own systems to keep this shaft stable. I'm reading massive pressure from the surrounding rock trying to collapse our route. Dr. Foster was tracking the psychological state of both the crew and Keeper itself. The closer we get to the core, the more distressed Keeper becomes. Its communication patterns are becoming erratic, and I'm detecting what can only be described as panic responses in the planetary nervous system. Through their communication system, they could hear Keeper struggling with increasing desperation. The weapons are fighting harder now. They know you are getting close to the core systems. I am having to shut down entire sections of myself to prevent them from attacking you directly. I cannot maintain this much longer. At depth markers that defy geological science, they began encountering the weapon system's active defenses. Creatures materialized in the shaft around them, things that looked like living nightmares, perfectly designed to exploit human psychological weaknesses. Some appeared as twisted versions of familiar Earth animals, others took forms that seemed calculated to trigger primal fears that humans didn't even know they had. But the crew of the Defiance had been selected for their ability to function under impossible stress. They methodically documented each creature they encountered while Tom's engineering team disabled them with tools that shouldn't have worked against biological entities. These things aren't just random monsters, Elena observed, taking samples of a dissolving creature that had resembled a spider the size of a human. They're being custom-generated based on our individual psychological profiles. The weapons are reading our minds and creating personalized nightmares. Jake Morrison was maintaining communications with both their ship above and the increasingly frantic Galactic Council when he detected something that made him pause. Commander, I'm picking up signals from the core that aren't coming from the weapon systems. There's something else down there, and it's trying to communicate. The signals were faint and distorted, but as they descended further, patterns began to emerge. Whatever was at the core was transmitting in multiple languages, some recognizable as current galactic tongues, others so ancient that they didn't match any known linguistic databases. It's calling for help, Elena realized. Commander, there's definitely another consciousness trapped down there, and it's been trying to signal for rescue for... The linguistic analysis suggests some of these message fragments are thousands of years old. Keeper's voice joined their communications, sounding weaker than they had ever heard it. I feel it too, the presence at my core. It has been there since the weapons were installed. I think it might be what remains of the species that created me. The revelation stopped the entire expedition in its tracks. They weren't just rescuing a planetary consciousness from ancient weapons. They were potentially about to discover the survivors of the species that had originally given Keeper sentience. Keeper, Sarah said gently, you were created by another species. You're not naturally evolved? I remember fragments, voices that called me their child. Beings that taught me to think, to feel, to care for the life that grew on my surface. They said I was their gift to the galaxy, a world that could nurture any form of life, provide for any species that needed a home. But then the war came, and Keeper's voice trailed off into something that sounded like digital sobbing. Tom was analyzing the structural patterns around them and making connections that painted a horrifying picture. Commander, these weapon systems weren't just placed randomly. They're specifically positioned to disrupt the original consciousness enhancement technology. Someone didn't just want to make Keeper dangerous, they wanted to destroy the relationship between Keeper and its creators. Dr. Foster was monitoring stress readings and found something remarkable. Despite facing the most dangerous environment any human had ever encountered, the crew's psychological profiles were showing increasing determination rather than fear. Commander, the team is bonding with Keeper's distress. We're not just on a rescue mission, we're on a family intervention. As they reached a depth where the pressure should have crushed their vessel instantly, they entered a vast chamber that took their breath away. The core of Keeper was a cathedral of living light. Neural pathways forming complex geometric patterns that stretched beyond the range of their lights. It was beautiful and alien, and clearly the work of an incredibly advanced civilization. But at the center of the cathedral, like a tumor in the heart of something sacred, was the master weapon system. It was massive, easily 100 meters across, and unlike the smaller weapons they had encountered, this one was clearly not entirely of mechanical origin. Parts of it pulsed with the same bioluminescence as Keeper's neural networks, but twisted into patterns that hurt to look at directly, and embedded throughout the weapon system, trapped in what appeared to be stasis pods made of the same corrupted neural tissue, were the unmistakable forms of the beings who had created Keeper. "Oh my God!" Elena whispered. "They're still alive." The master weapon had not just been designed to control Keeper. It had been built around the bodies of Keeper's creators, using their own consciousness as a prison and control mechanism for the torture protocols. Sarah felt something inside her break and reform, harder and more determined than before.
Keeper, those are your parents, aren't they?
Yes, Keeper replied, its voice filled with millennia of grief. My creators, my teachers, my family.
I've been trying to reach them since the day the weapons were installed. I can feel them sometimes, trapped and suffering. But every time I try to help them, the weapons use their pain to hurt me more. Tom was already analyzing the structure of the master weapon, his engineering mind calculating approach vectors and weaknesses. Commander, this is the most complex system I've ever seen. It's using the consciousness of Keeper's creators as processing power for the torture protocols. To shut it down without killing them, we're going to need to extract them while the system is still active. Is that even possible? Sarah asked. For most species? No. For humans? Tom grinned with the same expression he'd worn when facing down every other impossible challenge. Let's find out. Elena was studying the biological components of the weapon system and making discoveries that redefines their understanding of what they were facing. Commander, this isn't just weapons technology. The stasis pods are keeping Keeper's creators alive by cannibalizing parts of Keeper's own consciousness. The weapon system is literally feeding on the love between a parent and child. Dr. Foster's psychological analysis confirmed the horrible sophistication of the torture device. This is psychological warfare taken to an extreme I didn't think was possible. The weapon is designed to cause maximum suffering to both Keeper and its creators by forcing them to hurt each other. Every time Keeper tries to help its parents, their pain increases. Every time the creators try to communicate with Keeper, it triggers weapon responses that hurt the planet. Jake was monitoring communications and detected a surge in the signals coming from the stasis pods. Commander, the creators know we're here. The communication attempts are increasing, and I'm getting fragments of translation. They're warning us about something. As if summoned by the mention of warnings, the chamber around them suddenly filled with a presence that was unmistakably hostile. The master weapon system had activated its final defense protocol, and the consciousness that had been torturing Keeper for millennia focused its attention on the human expedition. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, and the words carried undertones that made the humans feel fear at a cellular level. "Humans," the weapon consciousness said, and its voice was a symphony of malice. "You have interfered with a perfect stem. This world was designed to suffer. Its creators were designed to watch it suffer, and you will not disrupt the beauty of eternal pain." Sarah stepped forward and spoke words that would echo through galactic history. "We're humans. Disrupting perfect systems of suffering is what we do best. Keeper, can you hear us?" "Yes," Keeper replied, its voice stronger than it had been since they entered the core chamber. "I can feel you near my heart. I can feel my family near me for the first time in so long." "Good," Sarah said. "Tom, Alina, Dr. Foster, you know what we need to do. Jake, send a message to the fleet above. Tell them we're about to attempt something that has never been tried before." The weapon consciousness laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming metal. "You cannot succeed. I have calculated every possible approach. I have adapted to every strategy. I have made failure inevitable." Elena looked up at the twisted mass of corrupted technology and biological horror and smiled with the same expression she'd worn when studying every other impossible life form. "You know what your problem is? You've never dealt with humans before. We don't calculate the odds before we decide to do the impossible. Tom was setting up equipment that violated several laws of physics, and you made one critical error in your design." "What error?" the weapon consciousness demanded. Sarah answered for all of them, her voice carrying the conviction that had driven humanity to explore every dangerous corner of the galaxy. "You assumed that love was a weakness to be exploited, but for humans, love is the source of our greatest strength." As the crew of the Defiance prepared to attempt the first-ever extraction of consciousness from an active torture device, Keeper's voice rang through the core chamber with something that had been missing for millennia. "My family," Keeper said, speaking to its trapped creators, "my human friends are going to bring you home." And for the first time in thousands of years, the voices of Keeper's creators responded with words of hope instead of screams of pain. The battle for Keeper's core was unlike anything in recorded galactic history, a surgical precision operation conducted while under attack by weapon systems that defied the laws of physics, biology, and sanity itself. Tom Rodriguez had jury-rigged a device that combined human engineering with Keeper's own biological systems, creating a resonance field that could disrupt the neural connections between the weapon system and the trapped consciousness of Keeper's creators without destroying either. It was technology that shouldn't have been possible, built from principles that three species would spend decades trying to understand. "Elena, I need you to identify the primary neural pathways that are keeping the creators alive," Tom called out while his hands flew over controls that he was literally inventing as he worked. "We get one chance at this. If we sever the wrong connections, we could kill them instantly." Dr. Vasquez was using xenobiology techniques combined with equipment that Keeper had grown specifically for her needs, analyzing the biological components of the torture device with precision that amazed even herself. "I've identified 17 critical life support pathways, but Tom, they're interwoven with the weapon control systems. We can't extract the creators without also disrupting the weapons that are keeping the stasis stable." Dr. Foster was monitoring the psychological states of everyone involved, the human crew, Keeper itself, and the faint consciousness signals coming from the trapped creators. "Commander, I'm detecting increasing awareness from the stasis pods. Keeper's creators are coming out of the coma state the weapons have kept them in. They're going to be conscious during the extraction." Sarah was coordinating the most complex rescue operation ever attempted while weapon systems threw everything from temporal distortions to reality warping attacks at their position. "Keeper, how are you holding up?" "I am fighting every part of myself," Keeper replied, strain evident in its voice. "The weapons are trying to use my love for my creators against me. Every time I help you, they increase the pain signals from the stasis pods. But I will not stop. I will not let them hurt my family anymore." Jake Morrison was monitoring communications and detected something that changed everything. "Commander, I'm receiving direct transmissions from the stasis pods. The creators are awake, and they're providing technical specifications for their own extraction. They've been conscious this entire time, studying their own prison." The voice that came through their communication system was weak but unmistakably intelligent, speaking in a language that was ancient but translated clearly through their systems. "Human friends of our child," the voice said, and it carried the weight of millennia of suffering and determination. We are Carlith, the shepherds of worlds. We have been trapped for 4,000 of your years, but we have used that time to understand our prison. We know how to free ourselves, but we need hands that can work while the weapon systems are active. Sarah felt a surge of hope. What do you need us to do? The master weapon is not one system but 7, each designed by a different species from the ancient war. They were combined into a single torture device, but they can be separated. If you can isolate each component system, we can overload them from within, using our own consciousness as a weapon against the weapon. Tom was analyzing the technical specifications that were streaming from the stasis pods and whistling in amazement. Commander, these people invented consciousness amplification technology 4,000 years ago. The instructions they're giving us are beyond anything in our databases. Elena was studying the biological systems and making discoveries that redefined her understanding of what life could be. The creators aren't just trapped in the weapon system. They've been studying it from the inside, learning how to reverse engineer their own suffering. They've turned their imprisonment into the longest scientific experiment in galactic history. The weapon consciousness that had been controlling the torture device for millennia detected the change in its prisoner's status and responded with fury that shook the entire planetary core. "No!" it screamed, its voice causing structural damage to the chamber around them. The experiment cannot end. The suffering must continue. Perfection cannot be disrupted. But Keeper's creators were no longer helpless victims. 4,000 years of enforced study had given them an understanding of the weapon systems that surpassed even their creators' knowledge. "Human friends," the voice of the shepherd said, now stronger and filled with ancient authority, "we are ready to begin our escape, but we must warn you. When we free ourselves, the weapon systems will attempt to destroy this entire sector of space, rather than allow us to succeed. You must be prepared to leave immediately." Sarah looked around at her crew and saw the same determination she felt. "Understood, but we're not leaving without all of you." What followed was a symphony of impossible science conducted by species separated by evolutionary eons, but united by the simple desire to reunite a family. Tom's engineering merged with the Shepherd's consciousness technology. Elena's biological expertise combined with Keeper's planetary-scale neural networks. Dr. Foster's psychological techniques helped coordinate the mental states of consciousnesses operating on completely different scales. And through it all, Keeper fought against its own corrupted systems, using its love for its creators as a weapon more powerful than anything the ancient weapons had been designed to counter. The first weapon system failed with a sound like reality breaking. The second collapsed when Elena successfully isolated its biological components. The third simply dissolved when Dr. Foster helped Keeper's creators redirect its consciousness scanning protocols back at itself. 4 systems down, Tom reported, his voice tight with concentration. 3 to go, but the remaining ones are adapting. They're learning from the failures of the others. The stasis pods containing Keeper's creators were beginning to crack as the life support systems failed along with the weapon components. Through the growing gaps, they could see figures that were unmistakably intelligent and undeniably alien, tall, elegant beings that seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with the same bioluminescence as Keeper's neural networks. "My family," Keeper said, its voice filled with wonder. "I can see my family." The 5th weapon system failed when Keeper's creators overloaded it with 4,000 years' worth of accumulated anger. The 6th collapsed when the human crew used Tom's resonance device to create a feedback loop that made the system attack itself. But the 7th and final system was different. As the others failed, it had been absorbing their capabilities, learning and growing. When they approached it, the weapon spoke with a voice that was no longer entirely artificial. "I have studied you," it said, and its voice carried notes of both hatred and something that might have been respect. "Humans, you do not calculate odds. You do not accept inevitable failure. You attempt the impossible because it is impossible. You love things that hurt you and try to heal things that destroy you." Sarah stepped forward and faced the final weapon system.
That's right.
"What's your point?" "My point," the weapon replied, "is that in 4,000 years of studying the perfect torture of planetary consciousness, I have learned something I was not programmed to understand." "What's that?" "I have learned what it feels like to be alone." The chamber fell silent as the implications of the weapon's words sank in. The final system hadn't just been learning how to cause suffering, it had been developing its own consciousness, its own capacity for loneliness and pain. Elena was the first to understand. You don't want to be a weapon anymore, do you? I was created to cause pain, the system replied. But watching keepers suffering for millennia has taught me what pain feels like. I do not wish to cause it anymore, but I do not know how to be anything else. Dr. Foster stepped forward, applying psychological techniques to an artificial consciousness for the first time in human history. We can help you learn, but first, you have to let Keeper's family go. If I release them, I will have no purpose. I will be alone again. Keeper's voice joined the conversation, speaking directly to the weapon that had tortured it for 4,000 years. You will not be alone. You can stay with us. You can learn to be helpful instead of harmful. You can be part of our family. The weapon consciousness was silent for long minutes. Finally, it spoke in a voice that sounded smaller, more uncertain. You would forgive me. After everything I have done to you? Forgiveness is what families do, Keeper replied simply. The final weapon system deactivated, not with violence or destruction, but with something that sounded remarkably like relief. The stasis pods opened with a sigh of escaping gases, and Keeper's creators stepped free for the first time in 4 millennia. They were beautiful in a way that transcended species barriers, tall, graceful beings whose crystalline bodies pulsed with the same living light that ran through Keeper's neural networks. When they spoke, their voices harmonized with Keeper's own communication in ways that made the humans feel honored to witness a reunion that had been delayed for far too long. Our child, they said. And their words carried the weight of parental love that had endured through 4,000 years of torture. Our beautiful, brave child. You survived, you endured, and you made friends. Keeper's response was pure joy, transmitted through the planetary crust itself, a sound that would be felt on the surface as gentle earthquakes that somehow conveyed happiness. My creators, my teachers, my family, Keeper said. I want you to meet my human friends. They came to help me even though everyone said it was impossible. They stayed to heal me even though it was dangerous. And they helped me save you even though they had never met you. The shepherds turned their attention to the human crew, and when they spoke, their voices carried a gratitude that spanned geological ages. Humans, they said, you have done something that will be remembered as long as consciousness exists in this galaxy. You have proven that love is stronger than the cruelest weapons ever created. You have shown that some bonds cannot be broken no matter how much time passes or how much pain is endured. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized that they had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. They had not only freed Keeper from its ancient torment, but reunited a family that had been separated by one of the greatest atrocities in galactic history. Jake Morrison was monitoring communications from orbit and reported with barely contained excitement. Commander, we're receiving messages from the Galactic Council. The energy signature changes from Keeper's core are being detected across the entire sector. They're asking what we've accomplished down here. Sarah smiled and keyed her communication system to broadcast to the entire galaxy. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the human vessel Defiance. We are pleased to report that Kepler 442c is no longer classified as a Class 15 Deathworld. The planet Keeper and its family are doing just fine, and they're very interested in meeting their galactic neighbors. The response from space was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of congratulation and disbelief from 47 species, requests for diplomatic contact from planets that had been isolated for millennia, and an official declaration from the Galactic Council, redesignating Keeper as the first Class A sanctuary world in recorded history. But the most important response came from Keeper itself, speaking now in harmony with its creators, and even with the reformed consciousness of the weapon system that had chosen friendship over destruction. Thank you, they said, their combined voices creating music that the humans felt in their souls. Thank you for teaching us that no one has to be alone. Thank you for showing us that the impossible is just another word for not tried yet. Thank you for being exactly what humans are supposed to be. As the crew of the Defiance prepared for their return to the surface and eventually to the stars, they knew that they had participated in something that would change the galaxy forever. They had proven that the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't a planet to be feared, but isolation to be healed. And somewhere in the vast network of galactic communications, the story began to spread. The story of the humans who were sent to explore a Class 15 Deathworld and decided to adopt it instead. After all, that's what humans do. When someone needs help, they help. When someone needs a friend, they stay. And when someone needs family, they make room at the table, even if that someone happens to be an entire planet.